kindergartners, here's an example of the artwork that we'll be creating today. So this is a winter landscape with crocus flowers that come up through the snow. So crocuses come up, they're one of the first flowers to bloom in the springtime, and a lot of times living in the mountains here, they come up through the snow. So we'll be creating this type of artwork with a combination of oil pastels and cut paper. Here are our supplies for today. So please get out your brown paper that you can put down on your work surface. And then these papers should have been paper clipped together. So one large white piece of paper, and then these colored papers, a pair of scissors, a pencil, a scratch piece of paper, just any scratch piece of paper from like the recycling bin, and then oil pastels. So we're going to do the sky, whatever blues you have, hopefully one dark and one light. If you don't have a dark and a light, then hopefully you can borrow from a neighbor. White, and we're going to do a morning sunrise that has some color in the sky, so any kind of violet, pink, peach tones would be great. So if you can get those supplies out, and make sure that you write your name and information on the back of your sheet, and then we'll start the lesson. Okay, the next step is to prepare the oil pastels. So some of these you can see get pretty dirty on the outside when they're just all together in the bag. And we don't have to be perfect about this, but with your scratch piece of paper, what you do is you just kind of turn and drag this along the paper. And you can see that for the white pastel here, you can see all the colors that were on it. So I'm just kind of cleaning off the edge of the white, and you don't have to be perfect about this. So I'm going to show you an example of where I'm going to stop. For example, I'm going to call that good. So you can see I'm not getting all of the color off, but most of it. So go ahead and do that with your other pastels, and make sure that you get a lot of the other colors off. But again, this is not about perfection. Oil pastel is about blending color, so it's good to have a little bit of variation in there. You don't have to have it all pure one color. Also, if there is a piece like this, you might want to tear back a little bit of the paper so that you have a little bit more exposed edge to work with. And I can clean off that a little bit, you can see. So once you have your oil pastels prepared, then we'll start. Okay, so here's my paper. Again, my information is on the back. I want to put it in the landscape format, so it's going across. It's not in the portrait orientation. So put your paper down horizontally like this. And then with your darker blue, what we're going to do is we want to use this to fill in the sky area. And we need to determine where we want the horizon line. So what's the horizon line? It's where the sky meets the land, okay? And we're going to put our horizon line about 2/3 of the way down the paper. So if I was going to divide this into 3 equal parts, it's about here. I'm going to do my horizon line. And your horizon line doesn't have to be a totally straight line. It can have some variation, and I'm just putting this in lightly. Okay, you can see here's my horizon line about 2/3 of the way down. Then I'm going to start filling in my sky with my darker blue. And I want to have the darker tones of blue up top, and then I can have lighter pressure. So with oil pastel, and I'm going to use the side of my pastel. So if you use the end, you get a line like this. If you use the side, you get a thicker area, right? So I'm going to use the side, and I'm going to fill in this starting at the top, and see how I'm going all the way to the edges? I want you to do that too. So you start filling in your space with this blue, and I'm going to go all the way down to my horizon line here. And fill this in. If you don't have a, if your blue looks more like this with the paper, you can take the paper off so you can do the side, draw with the side. And then once I get this all filled in, I'm going to go back and I'm going to apply more pressure. So see how when I apply more pressure to the pastel on the paper, I get a darker color. Okay? So I'd like everyone to do this with the darker blue, start filling in, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, now with your darker blue all in place, you're going to get your lighter blue and you'll start at the horizon line and you'll work your way up. So essentially what we're doing is we're blending the light blue and the dark blue together. So you can see again here I have this on the side, and I'll start by the horizon line and I'm working my way up and blending these colors together. So when I get, it's kind of the opposite of what I did with the dark, right? So the most pressure I'm applying is going to be down by the horizon line. This is where I really press hard. And then as I get up into this darker area, I'll press lighter, and that will blend the colors. So I'd like everyone to do that step now, please. Okay, now that we have our two blues, we can get our white oil pastel and start with our clouds. So clouds can be any shape that you want. There's puffy clouds, there's long thin clouds, you can have a combination, and there is no right or wrong here. So you can just go in and start creating some different shapes of your clouds. You can start with using some light pressure, and then once you get some shapes that you really like, you can add some, can put more pressure and add some more areas of deeper white color, and just kind of add in all of the clouds that you want. So you may only have a couple clouds. You don't have to fill all this space, right? So we want some of that pretty blue background to show. So think about what kind of shapes you want for your clouds and fill those in. Okay, now we can add in some of these kind of, think of them as sunrise or sunset colors. You know, the sky gets warmer with beautiful pinks and purples. So this is going to be really subtle. You can add in your any kind of pink or purple. Here I'm going to use a little bit more of the edge and just apply them into the cloud areas. These little bits of, see how subtle I did that with the purple? I like how soft that is. So you can do that with your pinks, purples, and any kind of peach that you want. Kind of warm up the sky a little bit. And then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so here's my sky. And before I go and wash my hands, I am going to use this pastel that's stuck to my fingers. And I'm going to create a little bit of texture in my snow. So you can just drag your finger across this snowy landscape area and just create as much kind of texture or mark making as you want to, because snow is not just white, right? So create a little bit of movement down here, not too much, but just a little bit. Okay, and then go wash your hands and we'll start with our flowers. Okay, so crocuses have these long, kind of like grass-like leaves that come up around the flowers. So what we'll do is we'll just cut from one side. We're going to cut a bunch of thin grass-like shapes. So you can see an example here of some of these different shapes. So go ahead and cut all these grass-like shapes from your green piece of paper, and they can be, you know, different lengths. Some can be taller, and think about, some might want to be, you might want to cut some at kind of a little bit more of an angle, but use all of this green paper from one edge and you can cut these different grass-like shapes. Okay, you can see that I cut out these kind of stems and grass type shapes here out of my green paper, and then you start doing your petals. So one thing I just experimented with is stacking my papers together and cutting out a shape, and then I get 4 petals out of it. So if that's not too thick for you, you can try that, or you could try just doing 2 pieces at the same time, and that way you kind of optimize your efforts here. And when you're cutting out your petals, think about, not every petal that you see from the same perspective. So some petals might be a little bit wider and a little bit different shape. You can see how these shapes, I'll do the same kind of color so you can see a little bit better. But see how these 2 petals are a little bit different shape? That is going to give our flower a really natural type look. So you can cut out a bunch of petals, and also I forgot to mention before that we do need a glue stick. So if you can get your glue stick from your bag, cut out your petals, and then we will start assembling. Okay, so once you have all your petals cut out, you can arrange them, put the colors together in groupings, and then you can start to define your composition. What is composition? It is the layout, where you place the different elements on your artwork. So I put these stems in a composition that I like. So it's nice to have an odd number of flowers. So what are odd numbers? It could be 3, 5, or 7. And just kind of play around with putting these in different places and see how it looks. Also see that I don't have them all lined up across the bottom edge. I kind of vary how high up they go on the page, and I group a couple together, and then I have a little bit of open space. So play around with your composition, and then when you have something that you like, you can glue down the stems. And then you can start adding in these additional grasses that grow around crocuses. So add in some more of the greens around here, and then we'll get into adding our petals. Okay, so you can see here that I have my stems and like the little grasses that go around the stems all glued down. And now I can start with the petals. So before just gluing down your petals, you might want to play around with, again, kind of the layout of these. And what we talked about before is like having an odd number or odd amount of colors. So what I would suggest is possibly not even using all 4 of these colors, but just choosing 3, whatever 3 that you want. So I think I'm going to use these 3 in my artwork, and just kind of, again, I'm setting these petals down on the artwork and just deciding where I want them to go. And you can kind of play around with the different ideas for them before you glue it all down. Another important thing to consider is in nature, you have a lot of overlapping that happens. So when I put this flower down, for example, see how this petal overlaps the ones behind, and that gives it a more natural look. So everyone can kind of play around with where they want their petals, and then they can glue them down. Okay, so once you have all the petals on, what I did is I took an oil pastel and I added the interior part of the flower. So I put yellow here and then drew a little bit of a stamen that's kind of comes up. See how I have these going different directions? Again, make it look more natural. On my pink one, I added a little bit of the violet color in there and then the yellow stamen. And then the very last step is that we can take a little bit of white. So these flowers are in the snowy landscape. So you can take a little bit of your white and add some detail, a little bit of white to some of your petals if you'd like. Again, it makes it feel more like a winter landscape. Okay, I hope you had fun.